Welcome to the Sourcing Exchange, where we connect, share and discuss insights that shape the future of sourcing in the apparel industry.
Welcome to another Sourcing Exchange. We're here. The ambition is to talk about the things that we love that relate to the fashion industry in particular, with a little bit of a bias towards the operations, the supply chain, the sourcing areas and the sustainability areas. Today, we're going to zero in on sustainability and also a little bit of a special feature. We're going to share some content that was presented at the recent Cascal Forum, which was held 2 weeks ago. Without any further ado, let me introduce our guest for today, which is Paul Goff, a good friend and very well known for his expertise in sustainability, but much more. And I'll ask Paul to introduce himself in a moment. And Paul is with the H&M business, which we all know is probably one of the best going around when it comes to sustainability. So really looking forward to delving into a variety of topics. Hey, welcome, Paul. Great to have you.
Great. Yeah, nice to be here, Paul. Yeah, thanks for the intro.
Yeah.
And yeah, looking forward to our conversation today.
Very good. Very good. Why don't I start with the easiest question, which is, why don't you just take us through what got you to where you are today, your bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's difficult to sum up 20 years of a career in a few moments, but I think I would summarize by saying I've always played in supply chain, technology, the transformation space, and then kind of more recently in sustainability. And that's typically within kind of consumer industries. And so, yeah, I spent the last 10 years in Hong Kong. So, we met in Hong Kong. I've recently moved back to the UK. And I really kind of took a bit of a pivot in my career about 5-6 years ago, where I had a few kind of personal circumstances that changed for me. So became a father. It's a big change. Still getting used to that. The company that I was at also relocated. So I was thinking, okay, well, what's going to be next for my career? And then also, unfortunately, I was diagnosed with cancer, all within the space of 2 months. So, this kind of life-changing experience like during that period was, okay, well, what do I want to put my energy into from my career? How can I have a more purposeful led career? And so, yeah, thanks to my wife, she put sustainability on the table. So I think it was a really nice fit from a sort of supply chain perspective, transformation, and then sort of bringing in sustainability. So yeah, I've really focused on that, since that point in time, and certainly see myself working in this space moving forwards. So at H&M, I head up the traceability space and the sustainability technology, specifically in the sort of sourcing and procurement space. So, internally, I have a sort of technology team that builds, this sort of internal, whether it's data, analytics and other sort of decision-making tools to drive change within the business, as well as that traceability piece as well, to understand, where, obviously a very complex and global supply chain where our products are.
Hey, Paul, that's a really interesting call out around having this moment in your life where a few things all amalgamated at once, quite significant things within your life. So it gave you that opportunity to reflect, and you thought, hey, you think a move in the direction to sustainability could be more fulfilling. I like to think that it's a very personal question, because for everybody it'll be a different answer. So not trying to push everyone into the direction of sustainability per se, but more interested in your personal reflection now that it's some 2 years later, I believe, if I tap into my memory a little bit here, since you've made the move. Has it proven to give you that extra fulfillment that you were looking for?
I'll correct you there, Paul. It's actually been about 4 or 5 years.
Oh my gosh, it's always the way.
I know time just flies by, right? So I mean, has it been as fulfilling? I mean, yeah, it definitely has. I think, I don't know, where it's kind of like an age thing. You kind of get to a point in time as like, okay, well, I've done half my career. I've still got another half to go. As we look at retirement age, moving out, and I was really looking for something else to kind of give me, that next spark, that next kind of like push. I'd worked really hard in the early stages of my career in consulting, and then a number of other kind of global businesses. And it gives me a lot of energy, and I was kind of really looking for that. And so sometimes the sort of day in day out, it's like, yeah, you're just going to work. But actually, what I love about my role and this particular space is that there's a lot of open collaboration across brands and across the industry, trying to solve this problem collectively. It's not like, oh, okay, we're working in whether it's demand forecasting or supply planning, and it's like, well, this is kind of what we know, and we're not really going to share that because that's our secret sauce. Actually, kind of for the benefit and the greater good, there's a lot more sort of transparency and collaboration, which I love. So I think, coming back to your question, it really does give me that buzz for the last few years.
Yeah, time always flies much quicker than you realize.
Yeah.
Hey, I think everyone wants to hear and learn about the H&M story. I promise you we won't stay on it for the whole conversation, but I did want to open with it, just get it out of the way. So the first question would just be, strategically, where's H&M kind of pitching, if you think about the top three strategies, perhaps?
Yeah. So if we look at our sustainability agenda, it is very broad across both social and environmental pieces. I think, just to be cognizant of time, I'll focus just in on the environmental piece for answering this question. So, first and foremost, our decarbonisation agenda is really industry leading. So, net zero by 2040, negative 56 by 2030, and that's including scope 3, and it's an absolute target. So these are really significant numbers, a really significant transformation that we are driving both for us and the rest of the industry. So this would be sort of number one. I think other objectives that we put out there externally, you guys can take a look at the H&M sustainability report. But if we look at our water reduction target, negative 30 by 2030, and then also on the material side for 2030, we are targeting a 50% recycled content within our material basket, which again is another significant target. So I would kind of coin those as the top three within the environmental side.
I'm not too sure whether to ask you how well you're progressing or what your biggest challenges are, but you take it any way you want to take it.
Yeah. I think how we're progressing, just on the scope 3 side, and that's really kind of where I kind of play, and sort of my team supports a lot in that space as well. So we've seen a 24% decarbonisation so far on that, and that was publicised last year. We'll have a new report out, and we're seeing good progress there. So I would say that all of the efforts, and it is a very broad effort across multiple functions, and then specifically, if we look at the decarbonisation journey and the percent of scope 3, so this is really kind of from our purchased goods, so the products that we sell, the majority of that is from the factories, and then specifically kind of those heavy industrial processes. So typically sort of tier 2, so your sort of dyeing processes. We've really kind of focused in a lot of initiatives that I can kind of talk on to those later. That has really kind of landed us in a good trajectory as we look to our target for 2030. So I think in good shape, and I think positive surprises there would be we've actually been able to kind of decouple growth from our decarbonisation journey, which really has kind of shown the level of effort that we're putting in it as a business.
Well, what does that mean, decouple growth? That means that even when you're not,
so essentially, like decoupling growth, essentially any business that is producing more or doing more would have a higher carbon footprint. So in a declining business, your footprint would be declining. In a growing business, your footprint, everything being equal, is going to increase. So to decouple that growth and then decarbonisation, to have a growing business, but then also kind of bend the curve from a decarbonisation perspective is really a tough one to crack. And that's where you kind of really need those sort of those sort of transformations, those sort of significant changes, across your value chain, or how the business operates.
Hey, you mentioned when you were talking about what your role is specifically, you made quite a few references there to the technology side.
Mm-hmm.
It's I think it's clear to most people that H&M's use of technology, proprietary technology, in-house built technology, maybe is arguably better than what's available in the broader market, perhaps, but it's certainly very sophisticated. Uh, how much, tough question, how much of the success in relation to progress you're making do you think is underpinned by the tech?
Biased answer here, Paul. I'm going to say it's front and center. I think it's a combination of things. I think that if we think about us as a business, the scale is really the kind of the complexity, kind of first and foremost. So you need technology and you need like robust data to be able to manage a business at our scale. And so I would say it's kind of foundational. Without that, it's kind of not, the engine's not going to run in any kind of function. But then if I kind of specifically look at the sustainability space, the level of like primary data that we have, so that's kind of really the actual raw data rather than just averages that we're gathering from our value chain. The breadth of primary data that we have and that we ingest, the way that we're able to also forecast, so we're not just looking in the rear view mirror in terms of what is our supply chain carbon bin, but we're also able to look forwards as well and look at those roadmaps with our strategic suppliers and how we sort of digitalized all of those. It really kind of does play us into a very strong space. And so yeah, we have some SaaS tools, so things that we buy off the shelf, some things that we do in-house, and we can obviously things that we do in-house, we can tailor them very specifically to our needs. So I think, I would just kind of summarize by saying I think that the data piece is essential to play, but we definitely use it as a competitive advantage as well, for us. So there's investment there, which is great.
If we kind of move to the broader industry, I mean, the most obvious observation is H&M is making good progress against its targets. But when you look at the industry in general, not only is the industry not moving positively towards the target, actually moving in the wrong direction from the target. What's kind of the two things that stand out as you think holding the industry back? Why is it that they're not progressing well?
If I step back and look at the last sort of 3 years or so, there was definitely a peak. Kind of 3 years ago, there was a lot of ambitions out there. There was a lot of kind of momentum, sort of post-COVID. People were putting out clear net zero 2040 targets. There's a lot of momentum just from the media, from conferences, from a number of other spaces, and that really kind of built a lot of momentum at that point. And over the last few years, specifically the last, I would say even 12 months or so, those headwinds kind of politically have really kind of softened things. And I would then say, the kind of policy kind of pieces. If we look at kind of EUDR, for example, kind of some recent, though not in a kind of decarb space, but certainly news that is emerging here. It's looking like there'll be a pause on that front. Also, kind of there has been talks around cross-border adjustment mechanisms. So, high carbon products coming into Europe, for example, that would have a carbon cost associated with them. I definitely feel like there's a softening there on that side. So, with the backdrop of supply chain disruptions, tariffs, it's all about prioritization for a business ultimately. And so, looking at where do the priorities land, typically that's going to be top line growth and bottom line cost reduction. And so sustainability, unfortunately, is typically one of those things that is pushed off the table.
So if you flip it around, then I always think of H&M and I think of Patagonia, who are putting, the two obvious ones who are investing heavily, and then kind of flip the question around and say, do you see the two brands getting a tangible competitive advantage? I don't know if you fast forward 12 months. Do the brands even talk about that, or it's not really about that, or do you see that competitive advantage? I mean, certainly what dawns on me is, if nothing more, if if other retailers and brands had to catch up, it would take them years to catch up.
Hmm.
So you definitely
Yeah.
have a time advantage. But what is that advantage? How do you talk about that within the brand?
Mm. I think there's a number of things here. There's the kind of the culture of the business of just doing the right thing. And for us, this is just the right thing to do. And the longevity of the brand, so the consumer of the future is really going to be more anchored than the consumer of today, with having product that is low impact. And I then also would say, from a supply chain perspective, that the benefits that you get from those strategic partnerships that are really kind of embedded with the dialogue, with the level of transformation that's required, with capital equipment and that investment, or whether it's driving change in machinery. This type of level of conversation really kind of deepens that strategic partnership, and with that, really kind of there are other benefits as well, that are really driven out of those. So I've kind of coined it in those three areas, Paul, to sort of really anchor the continuation of the strategy that for us is just something that we hold close.
I think that last one is really interesting and I wonder if it would surprise the viewers to hear that the partnership gets deeper. Uh, I mean, I think I always find that there's half the industry out there who lean into partnerships, and there are half out there who don't. And it sounds like you're getting a really deeper layer of partnership as a consequence. And as you said, you're getting additional benefits uh, as a consequence of doing that. Like, could you just touch on one of the additional benefits just for the viewers?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to kind of build on, the strategic partnership piece. As a brand, we do have a lot of people like feet on the street in our production countries, where there really is that tight coupling of, the teams. Looking at, say, energy efficiency as a kind of a topic. There's cost reduction to be had there if we're looking at, say, a dyeing process where you could have a heat exchanger installed fairly cheaply and easily, which would definitely drive some energy efficiency benefits. You've got, okay, rooftop solar, for example, with a payback period of, say, 3 to 5 years. And then beyond that, it's going to be, adding, to your top line. And so putting on the table like these sort of opportunities that essentially are beneficial to us from our decarbonisation journey, and then beneficial to the supplier in terms of their cost base.
Hmm.
I mean, it's win-win. It really is kind of win-win. If we look at that partnership piece, and then I would also kind of zoom out even further on this topic and say, with our kind of public affairs work, and if we look at, say, Indonesia, for example, and we've recently, I think it was earlier on this year, agreed with the government to put in place a REC kind of opportunity. So it's essentially like a certificate that can be bought by a business to prove that they have purchased renewable electricity for their operations. Previously this was not available, and we've really kind of partnered with the government at that kind of national level of change. Similarly, in Bangladesh, for power purchase agreements and a solar farm for factories to be able to procure that renewable energy directly. And again, that kind of provides kind of macro transformations within a country but then also, gives suppliers, opportunity to decarbonize as well.
Maybe last question on this topic. This kind of idea of unintended consequences, which I find interesting. Kind of the belief that when you do good things will happen, even from places you don't foresee. The one that might come to mind as an example would be if we find ourselves facing resource shortages that we never expected to prevail so quickly, right? Which would put the foot on the gas for companies who can address some of these issues related to decarbonisation. It's a bit of an abstract question, but are there things that you hope come through that perhaps aren't on the radar? Does that kind of, is it too abstract or something you can work with?
Yeah. I mean, I think I would definitely chime back to the supplier relationships, the kind of cost reduction piece that's kind of there. I think resilience as well would be something that's really there, obviously, with the kind of the volatility, of supply chains historically, and we've all worked in supply chain for a number of years, and know that volatility will always be there. Showing that kind of commitment, through the partnerships that required to drive this change, then that really kind of shows a commitment on both sides to kind of future, manage the sort of resilience that would be needed within the supply chain. So I think there will definitely be kind of paybacks in the future that are kind of tangential to what's kind of obvious, in terms of the
Yes.
topic at discussion.
Hey, I just want to introduce kind of a related but new topic. The topic of adaptation. Only up until recently, I was unaware that this was a topic in the sustainability community. Might just throw to you to just maybe give us the overview. What is adaptation, and where is the industry at with this topic?
Yeah, so I mean, mitigation is kind of what we've been talking about. It's kind of more of a kind of a forward-looking, proactive. Okay, we kind of need to make changes kind of here and now. Adaptation more so they get looks of the landscape of things are happening, whether it's okay, increased temperature in our factory, so therefore, we need to be thinking about our, worker well-being, and then how they're operating in, higher temperatures, and ensuring that is, a piece that's well looked after for worker well-being, as well as, okay, well, where we're sourcing from, is there going to be like flood risk within those areas? So looking at Bangladesh, for example, and ensuring that, that's on the radar, and how, as a business, are we going to manage risk through those known kind of pieces that will be happening on the supply chain, and so kind of adapting to those. So those kind of forecasts, if you're looking longer term, definitely coming onto the plans around how can you kind of adapt.
And so it doesn't, I mean, my initial reaction was it implies that the sector's starting to give up and say, hey, this isn't going to happen, so we need to plan for the worst. I'm assuming people aren't taking that psychology, but they're foreseeing, trying to be proactive,
Yeah,
perhaps. I don't know.
I think the one of the challenges, or there's many challenges with climate change, is that it happens like very slowly, right? And so we were talking about a 2-degree warming, and over a 10-20 year period, and actually how's that going to impact me, or how's that going to impact my supply base that's based over in Asia. The total time frames that people are able to kind of comprehend is probably just next quarter, and am I going to hit my numbers? So it really is quite a difficult topic to kind of put in place long strategic plans around, unless you've kind of got that clear kind of ambition and that embedded culture to sort of really drive the change that is needed.
Hey, Paul, I want to share with the viewers and with yourself some of the presentation material from Cascale that I thought kind of leans us into an interesting new discussion. At the Cascale Forum, which was a couple of weeks ago, we talked about a new decision-making framework for strategizing decarbonisation. I'm just going to take you through the highlights. We kind of shared this graph here just to set the scene by saying, hey, the targets were set for 2030 for a reduction of 45%, which you can see on the orange line. But you look at the red bars, and of course, what's actually happening is we're progressing in the wrong direction, and people know that. But we used it to kind of say, hey, now's as good a time as any to think outside the box on what we could do differently. We then kind of talked with the audience about, well, hey, why aren't we progressing? We talked about where people are focusing, which you did a great job of sharing with us from a H&M perspective, and then said, hey, why is that not progressing? We kind of had three points of view on that. One was, well, it's difficult to get funding because you need funding for a lot of this stuff, and perhaps it's difficult to get funding because there's a lot of competing interests, and a lot of businesses are just finding it hard to keep the lights on, right? So that was number one. Number two is there's a dependency on other parts of the business to get these sustainability initiatives up. So that might be a dependency on the design team, the sourcing team, the operations team. That's number two. And the third one is the innovation itself in technology is slow in maturing, right? So then we kind of said, okay, well, if they're the three things that are slowing us down, what could we do? What could a new decision-making framework look like? And so we said, hey, well, if it's difficult getting funding, we think one of the problems is when sustainability teams are going to get funding, it's all about carbon. And so we kind of introduced this concept of what about if it was about carbon and profit and plus plus, and plus plus means things like quality or lead time, even some intangible things like hand feel. So we're trying to acknowledge the fact that decisions don't get decisions are normally multi-metric, they're not single metric. And when it comes to this dependency on operations, we're saying, hey, well, rather than have a dependency, why don't we go from dependency to synergy, right? And the idea of synergy is why don't we go to the board together and develop strategies together and joint roadmaps together? That's sustainability and sourcing, for example. And with tech, actually, I want to narrow the discussion for today, so I'm going to skip tech for now. What I wanted to show you was it's just a kind of a conceptual illustration of what it would mean to go from having a dependency on internal functions to having a synergy. And at the forum, we said, hey, what if there's three scenarios? Let's just walk through them quickly. One is sourcing and supply chain approaching the board. The second one is sustainability approaching the board. And the third one is, hey, what would happen if we went to the board together? So when sourcing and supply chain approach the board, naturally they go to the board with a suite of initiatives, which might include read and react or introduce nearshoring. They may be pitching that if you can give us $2 million of investment, we'll improve the profit or the baseline profit from 30 million to 34 million. But what we know for sure is they're not talking about carbon in that pitch to the board. If we now flip to the second scenario where the sustainability executive approaches the board, same thing again. They've got a suite of initiatives which might include energy efficiency or installing solar panels or biomass heat, these kind of initiatives. They'll say for $1 million, we can reduce the carbon emissions by about 10%. But what we know for sure is they're not talking about profit. And so that leads us to the third scenario where what would happen if we can pull it all together? So now we have a suite of initiatives, and ideally we're saying, hey, for $2.6 million, we can improve profit from 30 to 35 and reduce carbon emissions by 15%. I know it's a little idealistic. That would be a wonderful outcome, but it's more about leaning into the principles. And the three principles we had here was, first of all, number one is recognizing that there's synergy or mutual upside in coming together. The second is it's a more holistic way of presenting strategy to boards anyway. And I have the personal point of view that the boards should really expect this of the executive. It's much easier to make decisions as a C-suite member or a board if you can see the big picture. And the third one, of course, is not many retailers and brands acknowledge the carbon reduction that comes from operational initiatives. So things like nearshoring or read and react, which you see as the purple bubbles. We don't, or I don't see it. Maybe it happens in some cases here and there, but normally that's carbon that we're taking out of the atmosphere that we don't even recognize, right? So that was kind of the principles we wanted to lean into in this proposition, that this new framework, one of the things that underpins it is we're more likely to decarbonize more effectively if we think about it in a more collective approach. But I'd love to get your take. I'd love to get your take on this narrative.
Yeah, I think it's a really great one that you've put forward here, Paul, and it's definitely the school of thought that's within the H&M group. And if I take a few examples that kind of talk to this, if we look to the actual leadership team, so the head of sustainability at H&M or the head of sustainability in production, in sourcing, they're individuals that have come from the business line and now kind of sit in sustainability, so they can talk the language, within the business. They've got the sustainability kind of piece, but then that kind of natural kind of synergy comes just from, those individuals that are able to kind of tread across like both of those worlds. Because there can always be, I think there's typically, we're talking like a different language. There's like kind of different terms that are put out there. So, the teams just kind of don't come together to sort of join those messages together. So I think what you presented kind of very like strategically in terms of kind of the board investment is very clear, and even kind of going down to countries of origin and how your kind of country of origin strategic sourcing type questions would come into play here. But then also I think like bottom up as well, from integration of sustainability and kind of the operational line, having like joint scorecards where, okay, if I'm a supplier and I'm receiving the scorecard from H&M in terms of my, performance, quality, cost, lead time, so on and so forth, it's a very clear balance between the sustainability objectives and then the business objectives. And those are kind of hand in hand and also kind of balanced. So to be a kind of a good supplier and kind of fulfilling what's required of me, then that is also balanced as well. So I think it kind of hits on all the tiers, to your point, in terms of that business and sustainability integration being fundamental, is all the way from the top level decisions, having the right people that talk the same language, and then having the operational kind of alignment as well in the business.
Hey, I'll just make a comment and kind of throw another question in. It was very it was nice to see that for the last 6 years, the overarching narrative of every sustainability conference has been alliances and collaboration. And I personally think people are getting a little bit of collaboration fatigue, with that being the primary narrative of all the conferences. Not suggesting it doesn't help us move forward, but what really stood out at Cascale this time around is I reckon I saw 5 different speakers talk to this need to embed or not divorce carbon from profit, or embed profit and carbon in the same discussion, bottom line impact. It was nearly the new emerging theme. So that was a bit of a standout for me anyway. But it does take me to the next point, which is, if I go back 20 years, I think the supply chain function perhaps was in a similar situation where it needed some radical change in the way it was approaching its role of being strategically influenced. And I remember back then, the ideas were kind of similar, which was move away from this single metric of buy big volume, stack it high, and push it through the network to this just-in-time set of principles that were perhaps born out of the Toyota story, for example. And I remember it was just too much for a lot of the supply chain professionals to embrace. So there's a big change. There was a huge change management period back then. I mean, if we really believe, I love the fact that you said that that's already embedded in H&M. I can't say I know many companies where I would have got such a positive response. I genuinely believe that that's a step change that needs to be taken, and it's a difficult one. And I wonder how big a change that would be when let's not talk about H&M, but if you think about other brands, how hard would it be for them to shift from this carbon-centered way of approaching strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, kind of starting at the top, like CEO, CFO, really with the, head of sustainability, and kind of, I do feel like company culture is a huge part of this, change. And if the company culture is pointing in that, supportive direction, then initiatives, things will kind of naturally kind of fall out. If I kind of look more strategically, I know we've spoken on this before, but I personally feel that there will be a number of like environmental tipping points that will inevitably kind of play out on our planet. That's just a given, whatever anybody says. And the magnitude of those will just increase over time. That's a given. And then the level of like social kind of tipping points that will push governments and businesses to really kind of make those change, I think will really kind of elevate what's required to then change those processes, and linking executive pay to carbon, linking individuals within the business to kind of scope 3 reductions, for example. All of those things really kind of anchor and sharpen the focus in terms of getting this sort of industry level, global level change actually kind of heading in the right direction.
Hey, we're coming towards the end here, so I might just throw to you with a more open question. Anything we didn't cover today that you wish we spent a little bit of time touching on?
I think just pulling on a couple of the topics that we've discussed already around like the industry change, and I'm seeing over the last couple of years there's a number of like industry platforms or industry tools that are really kind of gaining momentum. And from my perspective, from a strategic perspective, these kind of vehicles, these industry platforms are really the kind of way that as a kind of collective group, essentially kind of sharing supply chains, typically how we can kind of really drive that change. So, you mentioned the Cascale conference, and then Worldly that sort of supports that sort of data collection piece. That obviously kind of underpins like how we understand the supply chain, is that primary data collection. Also Textile Exchange and the work that they're doing within sort of the materials space, and then the associated traceability, and kind of really sort of driving that change for sort of transparency and also kind of sustainable materials, along with like AII. I would kind of coin these 3 organizations as kind of key players that really kind of are trying to push the industry and sort of drive that collaboration. So I think they're kind of key members of the kind of ecosystem, along with factories, brands, and others.
A tough question for you, because you prompt me to think about it. Of the 3 you're referring to, I know one, the Worldly, I think it's Worldly. They're trying to get primary data from factories on a monthly basis. And I must say, I've been in several discussions where industry peers have a real aversion to providing or requiring that information monthly? Because at the moment it's far less frequent, right? It's like annually or half yearly or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's the how would you address why monthly adds so much more value than say annually for those people who are pushing back a
Yeah.
little bit?
Yeah. I mean, there's some basics around kind of reporting. So if you're looking at like CSRD and other kind of reporting requirements, that's going to require you to kind of close your like reporting period and then have kind of validation completed, within a shorter time scale than that year plus the validation. So I think there's some kind of like basic kind of housekeeping things that I would say that would definitely kind of drive the need for a faster cadence than that year plus validation. I would say that there's always going to be a level of maturity across brands. So you look at a smaller startup brand versus a mid-size. Yeah, maybe quarterly or half yearly is going to be enough for them. I think really kind of it may not necessarily be like needed by all brands, but it's really kind of having that rhythm and routine of kind of having that topic area in focus, and it's kind of the habit that sort of drives. If you're a factory manager and you're looking at your energy consumption, that's essentially like a cost that's going out for you. So why not kind of look at your costs each month? Why not put that in? Why not then be sort of transparent, for your facility? So I think there's a lot of benefits there, that would definitely kind of support a higher frequency and just decision making as well. Within brands, brand like us, it's part of our scorecard. We need that information.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much. I always love our discussions, and I feel like we covered quite a lot of turf today. No surprise. So thanks very much. Really appreciate it. Thanks for people who are tuning in and viewing. We really love the discussions that come out of our industry, and we look forward to doing it again next week. And for anyone who's interested in joining in, please reach out, or if you have any comments that you think we can take on board, please get in contact. So until the next one, looking forward to seeing everyone at the next one. And Paul, a big thanks for being our guest today. We really loved it.